Welcome, everyone. Hey, this is a podcast that explores various aspects of addiction, potentially focusing on personal stories of recovery, scientific perspectives, and societal impacts or related topics. This podcast often features discussions with experts, individuals in recovery, therapists, and advocates to offer insights and support to those affected by addiction or seeking more information about it. Welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Addiction. I am your host, Al Richards, and today with our guest, Christine, we're going to be talking about the powerlessness, that was hard for me to say, over drugs and codependency. Christine, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. My gosh, you told me before we came on, you took the day off. Thank you so much for just wanting to be here today, man. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
And you was thinking about coming on a little, I don't know, gosh, almost 2 years, I guess, or a year and a half ago, because we met when we happened to be doing our Healing Utah Success Summit down in St. George. And we happened to walk into a restaurant, my friend Laban and I, and we met you. And you know, I really, really respected you for getting a hold of me and saying, Al, I'm not quite ready yet. And I don't push anyone if they're not ready, just however it works out. And then here you got a hold of me about a month ago. And then I saw you in St. George again. I just happened to be down there for my granddaughter's soccer stuff. And you're like, I'm ready. I'm ready to rock and roll. And here you are.
Yep, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So you have got one heck of a story. And I love the title, The Powerlessness over the Drugs and Codependency. And from a very early age, that's just kind of the journey that you started on. Is that correct?
Yeah, from very young age. I'm the youngest of 5 children. And so that feeling of just wanting to be loved, I think, just came from, my parents. By the time they got to me, bless their souls, they were burned out, and both of my parents were alcoholics. And they did the best that they could growing up. From a very young age, I was sexually molested, and that went into kind of, into my younger ages of I made other people the victim of what was happening to me. And so I think that stuck with me for like a very long time, that trauma inside, and thinking that I was a horrible person. And moving forward, I was very young. My first relationship I was 12 years old. I ended up pregnant at 14 and having a child at 15. Um, Ended up in a very abusive relationship for about 4 years until I just up and moved to Utah because I was in California at the time. And I went right into another relationship, wanting that love. It was the neighbor, you know. And at this point, I was about to turn 18. I had a 3-year-old little girl, and I kind of got my life together for a minute. I went back to school and got my CNA license, and I started working as a single mom, and I did live with my parents. Um, and I ended up meeting, like I said, the neighbor, and he loved my child. He was a amazing person. um, I ended up marrying him, but him and I fell into alcoholism very, very bad. We lost our home because we uh, we bought a home in Tokerville, and we ended up losing it because of alcoholism. Um, After a while, he ended up in a pretty bad accident and was life flighted to LDS hospital. So after that came major addictions, mental institutes, shock therapy. Meanwhile, I was, like I said, I kind of got my life back together. I dropped out of high school because I was pregnant and had a baby at 15. And so I decided to go back to, I actually failed my GED on 9/11. During the bombings, I had failed the English part. So I kind of left it alone for a while and then went back in, I want to say, I can't remember what year. And excuse me with timeline because it's all just a mix of just life.
Yeah, it's all right. Yep.
Yeah. So I ended up going back to school, night school, and graduating when I was 24 years old. And I went right into college and got most of my prereqs done for nursing. Um, Meanwhile, I was in the relationship. Like I said, I was married, and he was really struggling with addiction, and then I fell into a pill addiction pretty bad while I was there. I felt, and I ended up dropping out of college and moving back to Tocqueville and leaving my first husband. Um, Let me mind you, I was so broken. I was so broken and just couldn't give a relationship. I made that vow to him and ended up leaving him during his hard time, till death do us part.
Yeah.
When he, at a very low part of his life, because he had major head trauma. So I moved back to Tocqueville. I kind of went off the deep end. I was drinking, and meanwhile, my daughter was probably about 13 at the time. We did live with my parents, so she was always taken care of and loved, But yeah, I had the codependency, so I fell right into another relationship.
Which which happens to so many of us, right? We
Yeah,
and I'm a firm believer on how that how the energy of the universe works, right? We get so comfortable with a certain thing that, and yet we want to get out of it. Even like with you, with the, with the abusive, we want to get out of it. And it seems like we're uncomfortable because we're away from it. And we end up attracting the same type of individuals into our life. And, I did have a question before you go even further. Twice you said during this time from where it all began to where you're at right now in your life, where you moved back to Tokerville again, you said you kind of got your life started again. What do you feel that there was a what changed? What changed that? What got you to go, okay, I'm gonna get my life on track again?
are you talking about the first time I came from
Yeah,
California?
yeah. So like the first time, and then you said the second time you kind of you went back to school and you started getting your life back on track again, and it seemed like you met someone, and then all of a sudden your life goes back to kind of
Yeah.
crazy again.
So I kind of want to like correct you on attracting the same kind of men
Okay,
because
okay,
my child's father. So I think this is an important part too. Like when I got pregnant with her, I didn't even know if this guy that I was in this relationship with, very abusive. I had ran away when I was like right before I had gotten pregnant, and I was raped by we were in a drug situation. I was doing drugs. I was rebellious. I burned down my parents' house, and they didn't even know till years later. I mean, there's so much in between all of that.
right, okay,
So with this individual, he was very controlling, I looked down, I didn't talk to people. He would pinch me in Walmart because there was men around. I mean, it was very, very abusive. My first, and I did never married him, but my
okay,
first husband that I did marry, he would have never laid a hand on me. I was his peanut, is what my nickname was for him. So he was good to me. I
okay,
mean, of course, there was alcohol involved, and so there's always that chaos. And I was not a good wife. I was not capable of being a good wife. I, yeah, I cheated on every single one of my husbands, and I'm okay saying that today because at the time I was so broken, and I'm going into this relationship after relationship, and after his injury, like till death do us part, I should have really gave him that benefit of the doubt, but I didn't understand like how he could be such an extreme addiction and choose that over his family because at the time I was an alcoholic, but not really. I mean, I did slip into the pills really bad before I left him, but like there was a lot of chaos that came with it. Like I told you, he was in and out of treatment centers, mental institutes. We even did shock therapy to try to help him.
yeah,
And I just had given up. I was like, I didn't stick it through because I was just as sick. And so I don't feel like I fell into that. pattern with the first
Okay.
or the second. So I've been married 3 times.
Well, I still have you beat, so it's okay.
So I mean, I loved my first husband and I loved my second husband. I had children with my second husband. He was an amazing father. He still is an amazing father. He was an amazing husband. Of course, there was some things because I was so sick. I ended up so sick. I went right into that relationship. I never gave myself a chance to even know who I was. I always adjusted to the husband I was with, like if they were a Marilyn Manson fan, so was I. That was my first husband. Second husband was a cowboy. I was a cowgirl runner, like just adjusting to the codependency. I never ever found myself. And meanwhile, here I have all these secrets from my past. I mean, right after I had my first child, I ended up having an abortion at 16 because I just had a baby at 15, like these things that I had carried along and never healed from, the trauma that I never healed. And so I brought that into each relationship that I was going into because I couldn't be by myself, you know. So for a while, when I met my second husband, we drank a lot. And I ended up pregnant 6 months into the relationship. We weren't married. He actually was renting the downstairs apartment from my parents, another neighbor. I like the neighbors. And so I ended up pregnant, and we actually were doing amazing. I was getting my life together. I got an amazing job. I loved my job at the time. And we almost lost our son when he was 2 years old. He was life flighted up to primary children's, and it was very, very traumatic for both of us. Um, my husband at the time got very sick afterwards. He cut himself opening up a go-gurt right after my son had just went through what he did, and so there was like it's called Epstein-Barr was triggered in his body. So we were going through just so much. So, and we both were drinking. I was an alcoholic for sure. I would go to the store, buy us a 30 pack, but in the meantime, drinking 224 cans on the way home before I got home. So he doesn't know how bad of an alcoholic I am. He would come home from work in the night and I wouldn't even remember putting my son to bed some nights. Um, and he was kind of in the dark, for a while, but back on track. After we almost lost my son, we both decided because he started having like true testimonies of like he was talking about the man coming down. I believe he had a near death experience, and here he was about almost 3 years old, so he's talking and telling us these experiences that he's having after his state because he was on life support, and I believe that he had a near death experience. So my husband started writing down his testimonies of the man coming down, Jesus in heaven. He was talking about colorful horses and just a true testimony that there's something else besides this life. And so my husband and I decided to go back to church. We ended up, this is where it really, I think, took a turn. We got married in the temple, but I had an addiction at that time of pills. I had had wrist surgery. I started taking Ultram. So I got married in the temple high. And I feel like just the guilt and the shame, my addiction just got worse and worse. I was pregnant with my youngest daughter at the time. And I got right after that, I got postpartum. I got put on antidepressants. I was taking so many different pills. I had found a bottle of rum from the neighbor because I felt like I was losing my mind, and I tried killing myself in the river. They put me in a mental institute after that. And so I went into the mental institute, came out, and my addiction just got so much worse. I started doing methamphetamines behind my husband's back. And meanwhile, I'm active in the church. I'm teaching the 14, 15-year-olds, going on a trek, getting high. I mean, chaos, you know. Here I am, a leader, and I mean, it got super bad. And my husband, I think, knew, but he was just hurt and in denial. So I was on meth for, I would say, probably a year before it kind of, okay, something's going on. He started finding my stuff. Meanwhile, my daughter, I blamed it all on my teenage daughter.
Mm.
It just, and then before you know it, like I had touched heroin. And here I mean, let me just mind you, I have this beautiful family. I have son, daughter, married in the temple, beautiful home. I mean, thought what most people think is life, right? And I was miserable. I was miserable because I had never healed from any of my trauma, like ever. I never got the help. I just tried to cover it up with religion and, trying to act like I was this amazing person, but I felt like a horrible person my whole life.
Yeah. So to pause you for a minute, Christine, did you ever, anytime during this whole period, go, you know what, maybe I do need to speak with somebody? Did the thought cross your mind at all?
Oh, I remember because, as most people know, you have to go talk to your bishop when there's things going on. And I remember just playing, please put me into a rehab center. I can't do this on my own. I was sneaking out the window in the middle of the night. I rolled my car, um, going to get heroin, and my husband didn't even know I was out of bed. Like, it just got so chaotic. And then they put us with a counselor from the religion, and had no clue what that my addiction looked like. And I felt like nobody really knew how bad it was. Like, I would get anxious so bad in the middle of the night and like crawling out my skin. And I would beg my husband, please go get me a beer. Like, please, I don't know what's wrong with me. I need something. And it just got completely out of control. I was hiding beer down in our couch. Our oven was broken, and my husband found a 30 pack in there. I mean, it just got, and it wasn't just alcohol. I mean, my addiction started with alcohol. My first drink was 12 years old, like drunken, blackout, drunk. Um, and so alcohol was my thing for a long time. I dabbled in meth twice for like a couple months at a time. Once when I was with my baby's dad, he went off the deep end into drugs, and that's why I think he was so abusive. And then another time, probably like my first husband and I dabbled for a while, and then that was it. So the rest of the time I was a major alcoholic. Like,
So, so you still didn't feel like that, or because I know with a lot of the stuff that I went through personally on my own as well as with my ex, it was the shame, right? I don't really want to talk to somebody because I don't want to be judged and I'm ashamed of myself. And I have found that to be the case with a lot of the guests that have come on the show. Do you think that maybe was kind of keeping you from going? Because listening to you, it sounds like you knew that there was something happening to you and you didn't like it. However, you just, and especially being as young as you was at the start of it, not really knowing which direction to go and if you could even go that direction.
yeah, oh, for sure. I always felt off. Like, even when I was truly doing good, I didn't deserve that. If they even knew who I really was, you know, the amazing jobs that I've had. I worked up in Salt Lake at a very amazing facility. Um, and even though I was doing amazing, and I was moving up, I ended up in medical coding and central supply for this, company. Um, and I never felt worthy enough, even though I was taking on these positions of, like amazing jobs.
Yeah.
Like, I don't And I think I almost self-destructed too. Like I, yeah, it was a lot because inside I was like, I'm a horrible person. They shouldn't trust me, and I was a thief, a liar. I would have told you anything to love me. I I stole anything. I mean, I was entitled, right? From very young age, I had the rush of stealing. I would just, like, and I was entitled to everything, you know? And I remember thinking, I can never change. This is who I am.
Mhm.
Like, this is who I am. And so, yeah, it was really hard
Wow.
to, yeah, it was really hard because these are the traits that I grew up with. Even though I was doing good at times, like I was never really doing good because I was broken.
You kept that broken label on you constantly, it sounds like. Yeah, continuous basis. Self-sabotaging things because again, you felt like you didn't deserve it. So why try even more harder, right?
Yeah, like my children's dad, like my last two kids' dad, like we had an amazing relationship, but I sabotaged. I sabotaged because I didn't feel like I was deserving of this love, you know. I mean, a lot of it was facade, that perfect family, the perfect home, the perfect, a lot of it was. And looking back, I am grateful that I went through what I have just because I think I know myself better than I've ever known myself. One of the things that I told myself when I got sober is I'm not getting in a relationship for at least a couple years, and I'm going on 3.5 years with no relationship at all. Um, and truly finding who I am. It's been a journey because it didn't stop there. It did not stop there. You know,
Oh, there's more.
it did not stop there. That was just the beginning.
Wow.
100% just the beginning. Um, I just self-destructed. After that, I ended up, so my husband not knowing what to do at this point of helping me, one day I got pneumonia. I was smoking heroin. My daughter was, I don't even know at the time, maybe 1.5 years old. Um, I was passed out to, I was out cold. He called in the police. They had taken pictures of me, took my heroin. I had about a gram of heroin laying next to me. About 2 weeks later, I had stolen, a friend and I had, we started selling methamphetamines together. We started buying big amounts and selling it. And we would always go pawn her bracelet and then we would buy some more. And then, it was like this repetitive thing. Well, I got into heroin and I was desperate and I stole her bracelet. And it was, I mean, it was, I can't even remember, it was like a $15,000 bracelet. And so I went and pawned that bracelet and went and bought heroin. And she they saw that I had pawned it. They pulled me over and I was arrested and taken to jail. And, before I've gotten in trouble here and there, and I always got out the next night, just you get. And so I was thinking, oh, I'll be out the next night. And 5 months later, I'm still sitting in jail with all these charges. They had got me with the heroin that I had on me. They had got me with child endangerment, like I think three child endangerments, um, paraphernalia, possession, and theft over. Like I just had all these charges. And so as I'm sitting in jail, and my husband was the one that had turned in all this stuff, and so not only I'm 2 days into jail, I get restraining orders, all these things thrown at me. Like, so now I have nothing. It's just like I went from everything to nothing, you know? Um, I remember just sitting in jail, not accepting where I'm at for a long time. Finally, I just became part of it because I had to. This is something that I had to fit into, right? Like this is my life right now, and this is what I got to adjust to. So I did after about a couple months. I finally was like, okay, I accepted this. Meanwhile, my husband felt horrible for what had happened. So he did get back in contact with me and try to get me help. I went into the drug court program. So I was released into the drug court program about 5 months after sitting in jail. Um, I successfully graduated that program, but never was really successful. I was drinking, I was doing things. I actually ended up arrested at court and put into a mother's home where I could have my children. And I was there for almost 5, 6 months. So I did that for a while, but and then I ended up graduating drug court, going back home, and it was just I was living in St. George away from my family because they drug court made us separate. My family was in Laverton, I was in St. George. I mean, it was a mess. I went back to my husband. Things just got worse. I don't even know what happened. I think I ended up going completely off the deep end. Like I remember just leaving my kids and my husband the day after Christmas, like walking out because I needed the drugs so bad. And I remember laying on the floor the day after Christmas and my little girl wanting to play with her little farmhouse that she had gotten. I couldn't even because I was withdrawing so bad that I needed drugs. And I remember walking down the street and looking back and just the powerlessness that my family's back there and I'm walking towards a drug dealer. And I think that was probably the last straw for my ex-husband. He was like, I'm done. And so, I mean, I became so powerless. Yeah, so I kind of was just on a journey after that. I ended up intravenously using. I was living in a trailer with no power and on a farm with, just chaos. And then I would get it together for a minute and drug test and see my kids for a minute. I mean, it was just back and forth and back and forth. Um, and like I said, the timelines are so mixed up that I can't even, I just, it was chaos. I mean, I actually ended up getting it together long enough to where I got my kids back. And I had married somebody that just got out of prison. We were doing good. I started drinking. It got so bad that I was drinking vanilla extract. Um, I ended up drinking rubbing alcohol. There was a day that I drank about a half a bottle of rubbing alcohol and I called my mom and I said, Mom, I'm dying. I need to go to the hospital. She said, Your dad just jumped off the roof. I can't deal with this right now.
Mm.
And I sobered. I remember sobering up. And my mom's neighbor came and picked me up. And when I pulled up and saw my dad laying in the driveway dead, I I ended up just going off deep end after that. Um, my dad wasn't a major alcoholic, dry drunk, never got help. And he got dementia and he was only 60, I think 5 years old at the time. And he jumped off the roof. And I just remember like not wanting to be like that, not wanting to be miserable. I did end up going back out, relapsing with that last husband. He was, when he was on drugs, he was very physically abusive. Um, lot of things happened, but right before we signed on our house, he had relapsed on drugs too. We had ended up buying a home. I got my children back. I was doing good. And we ended up losing our home within 6 months. Cars were repoed. I mean, just chaos, just chaos. I went to go pick up my children because I got them every Wednesday, and I had them 90% of the time at the time because I got them anytime that their dad was at work. I got them and I didn't work at the time because I was trying to get on disability because I was sick, right? I had sarcoidosis, I was bipolar. Of course, it was the drugs. Um, and so I had them most of the time. Their school was right down the street. I took them to school. So I had a really good relationship with my kids at that time, for probably about 2 years, a year and a half. And then I went to go pick them up one day and I got served papers because it was out of control. Again, we were living up on BML land with no power in this trailer. I mean, he would leave me out there for days to go down and get drugs. And I mean, just chaos, you know.
Mm.
Yeah, it was just, it got completely unmanageable. We ended up in Vegas. He left me there pretty much for dead. I ended up in the hospital after him taking me out on the outskirts of Vegas and beating me and just leaving me. Um, so it was crazy. Like I said, I just lost my kids. I had had enough. I had had enough. I ended up going and moving into a meth house. And 6 months later, after I left him, he lived in the tunnels down in Vegas. I came home one day and he was standing in my room. And that, like, he was begging me, please, let's go for a ride. Let's go for a drive. I love you. I miss you. So I got in the vehicle with him. Same stuff. We got out there, it turned chaotic. I was walking out in the middle of the desert. We're in a stolen vehicle from Vegas, just chaos, smoking drugs. I mean, just, and of course, I'm powerless over the drug at the time. So, of course, I'm going to get in the vehicle and get drugs. That's, you know. And so we ended up broke down. Highway patrol came and my ex husband ran and left me sitting there. So I ended up with second-degree felony, uh, possession of a stolen vehicle, and that's when my recovery began. For that is when it truly began because I was arrested. Um, I all of a sudden in the middle of the night I hear my daughter's voice. I have a daughter that's was in active addiction. Um, and she's laying next to me in jail. And she had brought drugs in, and we had both done the drugs. We got pulled out, both put in lockdown. And I remember getting pulled out in the middle of the night and getting searched because it was, I mean, just chaos. And I remember at that moment, like, where am I at in my life? Here I am with my daughter. My husband's, they did end up catching him 5 days later in the block over. Like, where, like, and I remember the guard saying, well, what are you going to do about it? Because, of course, I was the victim, right?
Yeah.
You arrest my husband, you arrest my daughter, you're against us. And that was when that switch, like, oh my gosh, what am I doing with my life? So I did get out. I did end up relapsing a couple times, but I went into a treatment center. It was during COVID. So we were on lockdown a lot. Nobody was coming in, nobody was coming out. We weren't going in, going out. Um, and so it really was the first time I had to like really find who I am. Um, and I remember a girl said a prayer with me in the hallway, and she told me, because I talked a lot. And she's like, do you ever just shut up? And I remember thinking, I'm going to show her. And I took a vow of silence for like 3 days. And I can't believe the miracles that started happening when I just stayed quiet and started learning and listening. And so,
So for the first time, you actually sat inside yourself for the very
100%.
first time throughout your whole life. You
Yes,
found
for
this
the first time
serenity
ever.
and wow.
Yeah. And just realizing like I've always known that I had like I've always cared about people. I was a CNA for years. I've always been a caregiver and cared about people. And so I knew that I was a good person somewhere in there. And like I've always cared about others, you know. And so I think I just started finding that little piece of like, wow, who's this? Because I was quiet. And so I mean, after I got out of there, I went right into what's called sober living. And that was a game changer for sure. Um, I got around girls that were in recovery. I started a program. For the first time in my life, I like realized I finally heard like I was spiritually depleted. I had nothing left. My soul had been just, covered up by all these character defects, all these false beliefs of self. Um, you know, I it was crazy to start realizing all these parts that weren't even who I am at all, and starting detaching that. And I had amazing women in recovery that I mean, my thoughts were so screwed up. I mean, I self-sabotage all the times. Like especially with my ex, I would just get angry, I would text and so these women took my hand and they guided me, into that spiritual place of like self. And so I remember the first time like really seeing again, I'm driving down the street and I'm seeing all of a sudden the light through these buildings. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been so dead that I haven't even seen, and I could see through the building and the dimension of the buildings. And I started smelling. I was so dead from the drugs and so spiritually depleted that I didn't realize I was missing these things for so many years.
So
I jumped.
question with you saying this, I'm picturing, I remember, well, when we first become parents, it's kind of cool watching our kids discover things for the first time, right? However, we're also busy being parents. When I became a grandparent for the very first time, seeing the reaction on my granddaughter's face to see snow for the first time, to hear thunder, see lightning, see a bird, or just whatever it may be, right? What you just shared to me, Christine, it almost sounds like you just had been reborn because you're seeing all this stuff that was right there in front of you before. But like you said, you were so, I like to call it looking at life through the straw, that all you see is what's in front of you. You don't see
Mhm.
nothing else, right? Until you remove that straw or split it and start opening up. And it sounds like this was your second birthing. I mean, that's just how it sounds to me.
100%. 100%. And it's crazy how much our ego gets in our way and blocks us from so much and the true understanding of what we're really here on earth like for. Like I said, I had women in recovery that guided me to that light again. And I realized like just walking in the path with God, that true, for me, it's God, for other people, it's higher power or the infinite light or whatever. For me, it's God, because I have seen nothing but miracles in my life. And absolutely, it's being born again. I mean, just feeling and seeing things and unconditionally loving another human being that harmed you, and seeing, like, I can look back and truly say that none of these relationships was them. My first one was, I was just learning, and I was a young broken little girl, and but looking back, like seeing the this was all me, just with no light, with no understanding. I mean, I think we get so wrapped up of what life is, should be. We should have a better job. We should, I mean, this is why we live, right? We we go to school, we go to college, we get a better job, we get the best job, we get the nicer car, we get the big house. And when I went into recovery, I had such an eye opening that that is not life today. I am the most simple person there is. Like, today, I shop at DI. I really, like, life is so much more than what society has taught us.
You just said the key word that I was wanting to come out with that, right? That's just society saying this is what we need to look successful. And you said something very, very key just a second ago. Even the wrongs that the relationships that you happened to be in at the time, the wrongs that the other person did for you, that you have that forgiveness for them, right? See, I can feel my emotions kicking in. And I think when we get to that point is when we literally start seeing and loving ourselves inside. Because to me, that's the only way we can forgive other people, is we have to heal in here.
Mhm.
And it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I was wrong earlier about the relationship, so please correct me. I think that's where you were at in your life at then. You are finally starting to see who Christine is as an individual, and you're loving Christine, who she's becoming, and that's allowing you now to forgive and love others, whoever they may be.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, of course, I'm human. So of course I fall back into the ego,
Hmm.
of course, and I recognize it today. I am aware of it. But I I mean, I can't explain, like, if I could tell any addict out there, like, if they could just find that true connect from the heart, the true connection to that, the light, I guess, the spiritual. And to do that, you need other people that are on that same path, that same, what I call, spiritual path. Start surrounding yourself around recovery, um, and just truly relying on others to get you to that rebirth, right? Because for so long, for me, I just felt worthless, and for the things I had done and never forgiven myself. um, and going through a couple, some steps, I learned so much about my character defects and what I could work on, and just being aware of those. And, um, you know, if you would have asked my family 5 years ago, because I was so far gone, I had shaved my head, I had a mohawk. I mean, I was walking around talking about past, present, future, things that I could see. That there was, I mean, just complete, like, my parents thought that I would never, ever recover, ever. And so to see people see me today and they're like, I'm a true, like, product of there is miracles here on earth.
Yes.
And for me, I have seen those miracles work everywhere in my life as soon as I was willing to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood Him.
Yeah.
100%.
You
And
know, I've said this to some other guests, and I got this from a guest that was on the show. There are those, which I'm sure you know a handful, I do as well, who lost their battle, right? God called them home, come back home, let's get you out of this mess, right? And not saying that they are weak, because they're not, right? The grasp was just so tight. They just couldn't find a way to get out. And then there are stories like yours and so many other people that I've interviewed. And this is this is why I love doing this show. God knows what's inside you. God's put you through these trials one after another, after another, after another, after another, hoping that you're going to get that lesson. Then finally you get the lesson, you start understanding the lesson. You and so many others out there now are God's angels, just like Jesus's disciples, walking the earth, spreading the word. This is a different type of word, right? You guys have walked it. You've walked the path. You've seen it inside and out. And to be able to feel the light, see the light, to now go out there and do what you and so many other people are doing, and reaching their hands out, like the girls did with you at Sober Living, and going, here, let's make a connection, right? Because the opposite of addiction is connection. And let's walk through this together. And
yeah.
it's building, it's growing.
Oh, 100%. And I know today the reason I went through what I went through is to be that hand reaching down and pulling somebody up out of that water. I have gone Christ-based, very much so. Um, and that's what I try to live by, is the, how Christ lived here on earth, to the best of my ability, non-judging people and reaching out to the ones that need us the most, not judging the ones that are struggling or in addiction, or, not seeing color, not seeing anything, but being able to help these people find their way into the light. My job today, um, I had to fight in front of a board to get my job because of all my past, but I work today for the state. I help others recover in mental health, and some of them have addiction. And to be that, and I'm a peer support. So to be that peer support, I got certified before I even started working here. And to truly be like, I know where you've been, let me help you. And they trust you, and that rapport and watching the light come on in their eyes is a miracle. I mean, I was blessed. I call her my spiritual guide. I mean, I was calling her on a daily basis because I would have sent text that would have ruined my life because I didn't know how to live. I didn't know how to live. I had to reach out. I had to ask questions. I had to be vulnerable and willing. The willingness is that, like, willing to believe that there is a power greater than us. And once you have that first glimpse of that power, and it's not all the time, I have moments where I know that I like to say I'm in heaven. I'm connected. I feel the spirit. I know that there's somewhere else besides this place. And then all of a sudden I'm back to right here in this, and I know I've had spiritual experiences that I've had miracles that there's no way. I passed a background check to get into my housing, which is a miracle. There's no way besides the hand of God that had made that happen. I got my driver's license back when I wasn't supposed to. I got out of jail time after I was clean and sober because my judge had COVID and the prosecuting attorney had COVID. So the other prosecuting attorney and said, "Hey, why are we putting her back in jail when she's doing amazing?" And I mean, just I've seen God in my life so much that like there's no doubt in my mind that this isn't it. But I get to be here for the next suffering alcoholic, addict, codependent, mental health. Because for me, a lot of my addiction was mental health too. I mean, there was something obviously wrong. Anybody that's putting drugs into your body, there's something wrong in, and so it's, I mean, I never in my world, like, I never thought I would be clean and sober again. I remember being so, and I remember thinking I'm going to die, and that was okay. I overdosed on heroin and was in the hospital. Um, there's multiple times where I come to, and I didn't know if what happened. So many times I shouldn't be here. So many times that I was in police chases. I mean, just chaos, sleeping on. I mean, I'm surprised I never got trafficked. And I woke up a couple times where I don't know what happened. You know, I put myself in horrible situations. I slept on trap house floors. I mean, horrible situations that I should be dead. And I know that God was not. He
Yeah.
was like, nope, you're going to experience this so you can help. And this is your purpose now. For the first time in my life, I have purpose, and that is to help the next one in line.
Yeah.
I fought for my kids after I got clean and sober. I just got them back this September. Um, and I had a home for them to come to. I have an amazing relationship with them today. I, I mean, just the miracles in my life, and I'm okay with the chaos sometimes. Like I know that God has a plan for those that. Somebody asked me last night, isn't it hard when you're trying to help somebody and they just, nope, they don't want it. They just want to isn't that hard? I said, no, because I know God's got a plan for them. And she asked me, well, why do you keep trying to help if you know they don't want help? And I said, because there might be that one thing that you say that all of a sudden that spirit just hits them enough where they're like, oh my gosh, they had that moment of, okay, you never give up. You just keep doing the best you can to help them.
Oh
It,
yeah. Yeah. You
yeah.
never know when that sliver is going to stick them, right? And using that analogy, because working in like the construction type field and that I work in, you handle with wood for forming and framing and all kinds of different things, and there's times you don't wear your gloves, and you got this board that looks all smooth and everything, and you go to move it, and there's one little teeny piece that just happens to be sticking out, and it goes right through your hand. you know it's like your reminder, okay, I got to put my gloves on next time, right? And what you just said with that person asking you that question, all it takes is one word or maybe even one sentence for that light bulb, that switch to turn on, that
Yeah.
gets them thinking in the opposite direction, in the direction that you're hoping that they'll get. And being a peer support specialist, this because I know this is they train you on that, right? They train you to get people to for you to help them get thinking a little bit. It's not that you're telling them what to do, you're getting them to use their own mind a little bit to start thinking differently. And man, when that light switch goes on, and you've seen it many times, you see that glow
Oh, 100%.
happen, right? And all of a sudden you see that light turn on. Literally, you see it turn on right in front of you. And that's just the first step.
Exactly. I feel like a lot of, for me too, is sometimes I don't even have to say anything. It's just people, and especially people that I was in addiction with, coming into recovery today, they just see me and they're like, okay, there's miracles because when I knew her, she had a red mohawk.
Right.
Now she's working, and it's crazy because in my job today that I end up, I end up seeing, it's just a given that you're seeing these people you were in addiction with. And so sometimes just being there and being like, if that person is sober today, I know I can do it.
Right.
Just even, and it's, I, I was thinking, and I'm like, if I could say anything to help somebody, it's like there's not just that one thing. It's just being an example and truly living Christ like when nobody's watching as well. So practicing everything that you're preaching, and not preaching, but practicing everything that you're doing at home too. Like it's and I never was that. I was two completely different people, right? I mean, I was who you wanted me to be,
Hmm.
and my story was your story, and for a long time. So just, I think the authenticity of self, and sharing that with other people, like the true self, and not thinking that you have to make them believe, and that for me was really hard because I had this ego that told me I had to tell a story. I needed to make them love me and like me, and for a long time. And now I'm just, this is who I am. And of course, I'm human. So there's a lot that I'm still working on. And you know what? Today I get to pick up the phone and I talk to my spiritual guide almost on a daily basis. And today and she puts me right back down, right back down. That's not it.
Yep.
And, and luckily I have that today, though, that I have somebody that's had way more experience than I have. I reach out to her almost on a daily basis because there's times I don't know how to live.
Mhm.
It's not going to change overnight. I had 40 years of chaos, and I'm straining, 40 years of just chaos in my life. Um, I wanted to kind of like bring it back to like, I I want to, when you said like that spiritual experience or rebirth,
Mhm.
it's crazy what has happened. And this was like the true evidence of, oh my gosh, like children are that light still. Um, I will have a moment of that little girl, and it's before I can even remember, but I remember seeing through the eyes of that child before my innocence was taken, before I was harmed, and remembering that feeling. And all of a sudden it happens now. And I'm like, oh, I remember this when I was a little girl, and I'm talking young, like 3 or 4 years old. And being connected to the light most of the time. And I feel like grow, as we these experiences, and as we learn and have these experiences, like we get detached from that and are less seeing of the light, carrying all these character false beliefs, right, from society. But I just, it's exactly like being a child again, and sometimes thinking like that child too.
Yeah.
You know, like,
And that is such a good point, Christine, seriously, because I've taken some coaching classes. I took a few last year, and it's crazy because I did it with, well, one was a couple and another one was an individual, actually three of them. And every single one of them told me to go back and bring that little boy back.
mhm,
Every single one of them, right? And they don't know one another, but they, with me sharing my life and where things are at and where I want to go and stuff like that, they're like, you got to start bringing that little boy out.
that,
And it's crazy because I had the little boy out for a long time, and then I got caught up in a stressful job, snorting cocaine and drinking every weekend, gaining a ton of weight, just losing myself, and then in a relationship where my partner was battling alcoholism, and I threw so much dirt on top of me. I buried me so freaking deep. And I remember someone asked me, I guess it was last year. I lose track of time so fast that they said, when was the last time you really just laughed your ass off? As a matter of
Yeah.
fact, I think it was one of the coaches. And I went, oh, um, I couldn't tell them. I
Yeah.
couldn't tell them when the last time was where I literally was holding my gut because I was laughing so hard because I had buried me so deep to protect myself. You know, my subconscious kicked in. Anytime anything was starting to go good, man, my subconscious was kicking in, going, be ready, be ready. The door's going to slam you in the face again. It's coming, right? Because it's happened every single time. And and going through this divorce that I've gone through and getting away from what I needed to get away from, and I did everything like I did everything I could to stay with her for 8 years, however long it was. I stood by her side because I wanted to be that husband, right? I wanted to be there through thick and thin, no matter what. And then after a certain amount of time of sobriety, then it came back. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I can't go that direction. To see who I am today, and I'm not blaming her. So for our listeners, I want them to know I'm not blaming this on her. I'm the one that was doing it. This is myself, right?
Mm.
To understand that and to be able to bring this little boy out again to where I love joking around, I love kidding around, and I mean, pretty much almost on a 95% basis, I wake up every morning just freaking on cloud nine. On
That's
cloud nine. And I live simple as well, right? A very, very simple. And do I want other things? Of course I do. However, I also know at this time in my life, being 60, that's not what's going to make me happy. I'm going to make myself happy. Doesn't matter where I'm at, what I'm doing. Material things doesn't make me happy. Having a relationship, I don't need that to make me happy. I want these things, right? I would love to have these things in my life, except I know now my happiness depends all on me.
right.
And it sounds like you have found that within yourself, and you've also talked about how our ego loves to mess with us, right? Especially when we've been so lost for so long. And Dave DeRocher, I don't know if you know him, the executive director for the Other Side Academy, he got in my face last January. And first he asked permission to speak openly, and I gave him permission. And he literally got inches away from my face and pointed his finger at me and told me, you need to start effing doing this and you start effing doing that. And my ego kicked in, and I'm like, who the hell are you to talk to me this way? And my bricks are going up, and I almost felt like putting my knee up and kicking his chair because I had wheels on it and pushing him across the room. However, all the stuff I've been going through and the training that I've been going through and wanting to be different, I was able to recognize it. And it was because of help of who my higher power, who I also call God, and other individuals. And I recognized it and went, wait a minute, I gave this man permission. I owe it to him to listen to him, right? And I did. And it was one of the best things that happened in my life. And I still find that to happen to this day in my life. And there's nothing wrong with sticking up for yourself, right? If someone says something that you feel like is not in the right content, it's okay for you to say something different, right? It's however they want to take it. That's how I see. And if they want to take it in a different way, then that's their ego kicking in, not ours.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And that is the main, like I like to tell people, like when somebody gets in your face, there's something they're working on, there's something they're going through. And especially like, you know, I always like to go back to the four agreements. Have you ever
Oh
like
yeah,
the
I've
four
read it
agreements
twice.
of like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
don't personalize, never assume, be impeccable with your words, and do everything at your best. And if you're doing everything at your best, then you know that, like it gives you so much more peace and serenity because it's not about us. It's not about us when others are reacting or acting a certain way, you know, and having compassion for those that are still sick. I like to say sick or blocked from the spirit, because there's a lot of society out there that's completely blocked from the spirit. And when somebody's angry or flips you off, as you're driving, my first thought today isn't like hanging out the window and flipping them back off. It's, man, that guy must be going through something really to act that way to another human being.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's really, really important to find that self-love. Um, I feel like a lot of people are always looking for the everything out here when it's right here.
Yeah.
And it's that true connection. It's like, for the first time in my life, I'm not hearing the devil on the shoulder. I'm hearing the intuition, the angel on this side. And it's crazy how much, if I listen, and it's like my own, it's in my own voice kind of, but it's like automatically it's like, no, this is what you're going to do, or no, you're not going to do that. It's like I was sending out a text earlier. Nope, you're not sending that text.
It's direct, right?
Yeah,
It's
because I'm
direct.
listening to it. I'm listening to that. And it's amazing when you really are like, wow, I just got my answer. God is right here if you just are open to that, you
Oh,
know, and guiding
amen.
you. Yeah, it's just like you've got to just listen. And it's crazy how much, like, the second I do something or have a moment where I react, I'm able to be like, oh my gosh, I was in the wrong. What was it I was feeling? Was I jealous? Was I, yeah, like, I find this feeling behind it. Okay, I react. Okay, this was all me. This
Yeah.
had nothing to do with that other person. And to be able to do that and be aware of it, and then, hey, I'm really sorry that I reacted that way, you know, or the way I acted was not right. And to be able to do that, I mean, it's so healing, so healing.
And
And to
one of the,
truly
oh, go ahead. No, go ahead. You
and
said
to
the beginning.
truly look at, like, my past relationships, like, it had nothing to do with them. It had to do with me,
Mhm.
the way that I reacted or chose to act in that relationship. It wasn't them. Wasn't, I mean, it's crazy to see how much part I really had in my whole life. You find, what's my part in somebody harming me as a child? My part was, it was still affecting me today. That self-seeking and not forgiving, because that person obviously was had their own challenges. Like, anybody that's going to harm somebody else, like, what did they go through? What have they, and truly being able to be like forgiving and letting go of, I mean, I think one of my biggest shame, you said earlier, shame, was the kids, my two youngest, because my oldest daughter, I didn't touch a drug till she was 17 years old, almost 18. I was that PTA mom. She was in piano. She was an artist. I mean, I was a good mother to her. And so the shame of my last two children. And now it's like, I realize that as goodness happens, I'm forgetting the bad. And that's when my children are going to see me showing up to be a grandma and me showing up for them today. I got to teach my son to drive. He drives more than I do now. I mean, he's turning 16, and being there for my daughter when she's being crazy and painting her face and loving her, like, truly, like, and they're going to remember that. They're not going to remember
Oh, yeah.
they're to the age where, as long as the goodness is just going to keep going, and they're going to remember the mom that says, hey, be honest, my son got an extra motorcycle part, I got two of them. I said, and you're going to send one back, did you pay for the second one? Like, being that example for other people, and truly just, so I'm excited for the rest of my life. I really am. I want to continue to help people, and that's what my job is today. I never once have woke up and thought I don't want to work today. And I love what I do. I I realized that I need to get more back into the peer community and helping others at that complete depletion besides my job, because my job, you know, if it fills my cup as of being able to be a peer support. But I also know that I really recognize this week, that there's people out there that's at that very, very, very bottom that need me as well, not just throughout my work.
Yes.
And I need to get back into the recovery community more. I just had a huge realization of that. Um, because you think, oh, I've got it right, I've got this, and looking back, it's like, how selfish am I not to pay that forward to what was given to me at the beginning, you know?
Yeah.
So there's always work, there's always learning. And I just hope that I wish that I could just make people understand that it's a spiritual malady. When we die spiritually throughout our life, and we come to not a physical death, but a spiritual death. I mean, I literally walked through hell, and I know looking back, that's where I was in that temporary time. I call it my shadows of the valley of death, because that's exactly what it was. There was no light. The skies were gray. I mean, there was no birds. There was no flowers. It was gray. It was cold. It was dark. There was no life in people. There was zombies walking around. I mean, this is what I lived in for a long time and didn't even know I was there. You
Well,
know?
with you just saying this, Christine, reminds me of what my guest said on my earlier show. He does a lot of documentaries, videotaping, and things like that, right? And he went and did a piece in Philadelphia, and I don't remember the name of the place, but I guess it's like one of the worst places in America when it comes to drug use and that whole area, right? Pretty much everyone in that area, they're on some type of drug. And he said he's doing this filming, and it finally dawned on him. No one's laughing,
Mhm.
no one's smiling. There's people passed out on the sidewalk. There's people who you can look into their eyes and it's like you see nothing. They're just, there's nothing there. They're dark. And he said it was like one of the most eerie feelings, right? Because you can go downtown anywhere. You can go down St. George and walk on the street and probably hear someone laughing or something, right? You still see life. He says there was literally no life anywhere in that area. And I'm picturing like a zombie type movie, right? It's just like the Walking Dead, but yet they're alive. However, they are pretty much dead as well, right? It's crazy. And you just gave a really good example by what you just said.
Yeah. And that's what I saw.
Yeah.
So you can only imagine the first time I'm sitting there and all of a sudden I hear birds, and the skies have never been bluer in my life, like ever. And I mean, it's crazy, the smells that, like, I never realized I had lost sense of smell, sense of taste, like things that now that I'm back alive, that I like to say, it's crazy that I'm like, oh wow, like, and living in that moment and being like, what's this feeling? It's
Yeah, right.
calmness. It's peace, like,
Yeah.
you know, and it's a beautiful thing. And I wish people could just see that's our main purpose here, is to be that light and to love unconditionally, love one another. We have lost sight of our purpose here. We have lost sight of life. It's always how we're going to do the next best thing and be the best.
Yeah, not buy the next new car or the next iPhone or whatever it may be,
Whatever,
right? Yeah,
right?
it's
And it's
completely looking at life in a whole different aspect, which will change this world completely in a good way.
and it's weird because when you start changing, the world changes with you,
Oh, yeah,
especially when
absolutely.
you're and the people you start surrounding yourself with, and you start seeing people that are connected to their spiritual selves and seeing Like, and that's the best part. It's like this whole nother world right here in this world. Like and it's really amazing. It's in the moment, being an addict was a horrible, being an alcoholic was a horrible thing. And I remember going through these treatments and stuff and just thinking it was the worst thing ever. And being away from my children was a horrible thing. But it's like I always think of that verse in the Bible where it's like, you know, God, when they take away your family and when they take away your house and your land and you're giving all these things up, you're going to have tenfold later. And that's my life today. Like I don't have the items and the big house and the cars, but I have life.
Hmm.
I have my spirit back. I laugh and I smile when I wake up. And the first person I talk to in the morning is God.
Yep.
I literally hold myself and I'm just like, thank you, Lord, so much. Just say the Lord's Prayer. I'll talk to him. Hey, let me be your instrument today. Guide me. Let my ego step aside. Let me help the next person in line. And it's, I mean, I never thought at the beginning of my recovery that I could even do that, but it's a natural thing now. And it's not, dear Heavenly Father, I love my mom and dad. I love, you know, it's real. And it's, I talk to him like he's next to me. Hey, today, you know, it was a rough day. I don't understand why I have to go through this today or whatever I'm feeling, especially like, ooh, I don't like feeling like this. And I'm able to say that, like, I don't know what this feeling is right now, but God, please help me understand it and remove it. Because there's always going to be those emotions
Oh, yeah.
and, and, and it's amazing when you truly have that relationship where it's just, and you're always talking to them. Like I work with mental health. So there's times where I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say when somebody says something. And all of a sudden I'm like, God, and I just say that prayer, please. And sometimes it's just to be quiet. Sometimes I just sit there still quiet. And sometimes I'll come up with something where I'm like, where did that come from? That wasn't my, like, okay, that's, you know, and so just listening to that and, you know, intuition. And that's the God, you know, for me, it's God. And
I call it my Holy Spirit when I get those voices in my head. I'm like,
100% that's what
that's
it
my
is.
Holy Spirit talking to me. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And just stay and knowing that we're all of one light, you
Yeah.
know, I truly believe that. And yeah, so
Yeah.
life is, I mean, of course, there's always going to be struggles and there's always something that we're learning. I like to say that, like, I have clients that will, blah, 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 and I'm like, what are you learning from this? You know, what my oldest daughter today, like, the learning lesson she's going through and just being able to step back, like this is her journey. That's been the hardest. That, like they say, turn it over to God, right? Let it go or let go, whatever. That was one of my hardest last, like I feel like not my last thing to let go of, but really just letting her have her journey and her life and just being able to be the example and not trying to talk my way, you know, to understanding to
Yeah.
her because that's just, I know today that that's not, it's not my part. I just can continue to be sober, live this life the best that I can, and understand that like I cannot make anybody change. I cannot, it's not me, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. We can't, I mean, we can help direct people to a certain path. However, it's still their choice to take whatever path it is that they want to take, right? I
100%.
mean, we can lay out all the breadcrumbs we want. However, if they choose to go a different direction and pick up the coal, then we can still be there to support, and
Yes.
that's
Oh, I
about
love,
all we can do.
yeah. And even just, even with clients, it's like, you know, there, I've seen a couple miracles, like literally miracles happen for some of them. And I've been like, they'll be like, oh, thank you so much. You did this. And I'm like, it wasn't me.
Yeah. Yeah.
You better be thanking God because he's seeing like, and then it's crazy what I could tell people too, trying to stay sober. Once you're on that path, it is crazy to watch the miracle after miracle after miracle, like getting, you know, like happening because you're willing. And
Mhm.
God's like, okay, she's finally willing, or he's finally willing. And the next thing you know, like life is just blooming for you, and just because you're really truly trying. And
And you're opening up, right? And you're giving your life over to him, right?
yeah,
Because he's not going to lead you in the wrong direction, and you may go a direction where, basically we'll just say the shit hit the fan. However, that's not what the final destination is, right? Because there's something past that. And I
100%.
I was visiting my aunt and uncle the other day, and I was talking to them about some stuff that's been going on in my life, and almost in just what you just said, Christine, it's like it's so crazy. It's like God just keeps placing the right chess pieces in front of me, right? And what I mean by chess pieces, I'm talking like people. I'm talking like there are no coincidences, right? All of a sudden something just happens that you did not even expect, which has happened to me, here a few months ago, that just I'm still in awe that this happened for me. And it's him, right? It's all him. I've had to take this certain path and climb over this rock or that log or go through this tunnel or sometimes crawl in the frickin' mud. However, it got me to that point. Because if I would have ever gave up and said, I'm not doing that, that would have never ever happened.
Right.
You
No,
know?
100%. It is. And that's the thing is, as soon as a trial comes in people's lives, they're the victim. They're the victim of whatever this is. And,
Yeah.
and, and being like, you're not the victim. What are you learning? This is an amazing experience that you're learning right now, and whatever it is, and truly seeing that in my life today, like, oh my gosh, what am I learning from this? And
Yeah.
it's not always comfortable. I mean, it's not comfortable. And that's another thing. I was like the girl that wore her hair to say like change was not for me. And now understanding that you're waking up and you don't know what today's bringing, and it doesn't matter what you want because it's not how it's going to be, you
Yeah.
know. And not waking up with me. What have I got to do today? What do I get to do? What am I? It's waking up like, how am I going to help somebody else today? How am I going to be the best for them today? Because like I've been selfish my whole life. I've had enough of me. Like, you know,
Yeah.
and it's amazing because it really is such a better way of life. Like, I mean, I was so selfish my whole life.
And I'm glad that you brought up the selfishness because my version is there's a couple different types of selfishness, right? There's the selfishness of like what you're talking about, right? Where you're so lost and it's all about me. Because I was that way too. I was a liar, I was a manipulator, it was all about me. If I didn't get my way, I'd figure out a way. It didn't matter who I had to push out of the way, it didn't matter what lie I had to tell, as long as Al got what Al wanted, right?
Hmm.
There's a different types of selfishness for me now. It's taking care of me, making sure I keep the love in here for me so I can now share that with others. Because if I don't have that, I can't love anyone else if I can't even love myself. So I have to have that selfishness for myself, basically believing in myself and will continue to want to be a better person. Just like you've said many times, so I can put my hand out now and help that individual find that.
Right.
Right. So I kind of look at two different ways, and then one more thing too. Gosh, we've been going almost an hour and a half already. It's so crazy. I love doing these shows. I love it. Uh, what we talked about, even like the victim, and you just said it here just a few minutes ago. Google Cartman triangle.
Okay.
Just learned this in some of my training, and it's Cartman with a K. So Karp, like carp. Man,
Okay.
man, triangle. It'll shock you. Literally, you will be blown away because all of us have done it. All
Yeah.
of us. And
Okay.
I've done it all my life, and I'm working on getting out of that triangle. Okay. So my training, I can go to the gym, the grocery store, anywhere where there's people, and I can sit and just open my ears and listen to people talk. And I can go, victim,
Oh, yeah.
persecutor,
Yeah.
rescuer. Oh, that rescuer just turned into a victim or just turned into a persecutor, right? And when I was taught this in the training, I went back and started connecting my dots backwards. And I'm going, oh my gosh, I do this every single day.
Uh,
Every day I'm a persecutor. Every day I'm a rescuer. And every day I'm a victim. Every single day. And they said when we first started doing this class, they said once you learn this and you start practicing it, it will change your life in a whole different way, which is in a good way.
okay,
Because
I'll
we
have to definitely go learn.
don't play that victim, right? I remember I have a UPS box, and I remember during the holiday, someone walked in there and there was something going on with a package that was supposed to be delivered. And I remember this guy telling the people behind the desk, "You just ruined my whole day." Victim.
Right.
How did they ruin your day? They had no control over what had happened. So now you're playing the victim. So what are you going to do? You're going to go home or go to work and you're going to start telling everybody, you can't believe what just happened to me. Right. And then they start playing this victim. And then guess what? Somebody that they work with or that they live with goes, oh, you know what? Oh, yes, that happened to me. I remember this. So now all of a sudden, here you've got this rescuer who's going to try to rescue them, but now they're playing the victim. It is so crazy. So check it out and
I will for sure.
let me
Yeah.
know what you think of it. So is there anything else, Christine, that you'd like to share before we sign off here?
I mean, I think I've said it. Um, if you're struggling, and just feeling like almost like it's this homesick feeling, even though you have a home and you have everything you want. That's how, like, it was like this, there was something missing my whole life. Reach out, get help. I mean, there's amazing 12-step programs out there. There's amazing recovery centers. I mean, there's a lot of recovery support for people. Um, and especially like I feel like a lot of people are just scared to take that first or to admit, like you said, the shame.
Mhm.
Oh, something's wrong with me. Like, heaven forbid that something's wrong with me, right? And so the acceptance, I feel like just accepting it and reaching out and getting help, because it could change your whole life, like your whole life. And even if you feel like you're beyond, because like I said, my nobody thought that I would ever be back. I'm not going to say to normal because I don't even know what that is, but be back to life, you know?
Yeah,
So,
I love it. Christine, thank you so much for being on this show. I
yeah.
mean, you shared one hell of a journey. I love to see where you're at today in your life. I mean, the first time I met you, I thought you was this amazing woman because you opened up to Laban and I and you shared a little bit of your story, what you could, because you were at work, right? You was at work. And then to see you again in St. George at the same place and talk with you a little bit and seeing literally you were a whole different person. And I'm not saying that just to say it. Literally, you like were night and day. And it had been well over a year, right, since the last time that I have seen you. It was August of 2021, and then here it was last year. I think no, it was this year. This year, it was just earlier while I was down in St. George with my granddaughter's thing,
Yeah.
and to run into you again and just see this totally different person. And even you got this huge smile on your face when you told me, oh, guess what I'm doing now, right? You just got this big glow and you shared that. And I'm like, man, this girl, she's on the right path now. She's heading the direction she's supposed to go. So thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, guys, again, thank you to all our listeners, all our guests, past sponsors, guys. Again, this wouldn't happen. None of this would be possible if it wasn't for you. And I'm just going to say happy birthday to us because I just did a Facebook Live video hope you guys have a chance to have seen it, but we just hit our 3rd year. The Other Side of Addiction podcast just hit 3 years, and Christine is our 263rd episode, man. We are quickly approaching 300, which I'm really excited. And again, it's because of you guys. Thank you so much. And we've been talking about God throughout this. And again, thank you, because he's the one that put me on this path to make also all this possible. So guys, remember this: addiction is giving up everything for one thing, and recovery is giving up one thing for everything. We're out.